Welcome to the Restoration Group podcast, where we're sometimes silly, but always serious about investing in Oklahoma City leaders who desire to integrate their Christian faith into their business. I am your host, Clay Steves. Today, I am joined by both of my co-hosti. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just go backwards. Go backwards and you'll find it. My co-hosti, Aaron Scott and Michael Mead. Team, I don't feel silly today. So how is it when that's a part of our intro, but then I'm like, I don't know that I feel silly right now. How does that...
I feel sad for you.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Give Clay a joke.
Oh, wow.
Make him laugh.
That was...
Okay,
Yeah, that
goes
made
right
me
on
laugh,
top.
and,
Here,
yeah.
I'll show you this behind-the-scenes mug that I can't show to the camera. Because
It might change our rating.
Yeah,
It would
we'll
change
have
our
to
explicit rating.
You can see it over here. Does that help? Here's the thing that'll really
Fist
help.
bump. Fist bump. I like
If I
that.
tell you later when I bought this mug for one of our teammates, you'll really enjoy that. So.
Oh. Fantastic.
Yep.
I love it. Okay. Good
so
intro.
silly.
Thank you. That's so silly.
silly.
I feel better now. Okay, great. Well, so just a quick recap, like for our podcast, we do an alternating format where we do an internal episode with the three of us teaching on some of the principles, themes that we've learned building and leading integrated businesses, right? So that integrate their Christian faith into the business. And then we have guests from the Oklahoma City community that we alternate between those. Well, for our internal episodes, we are starting a 4-part series. So we're setting some expectations here, right? That we're going to do 4 episodes on I'm going to say a crucial topic, Michael. I stole that from Michael, and he's a little angry at me. And in episode 2, it'll make more sense. But it's a subject that I believe is crucial towards leading an integrated business, and that is the subject of balancing performance and dignity within a business. The balancing performance and dignity within the business. I first learned those like that language at a unconference, which is kind of a funny thing. That Pat Lencioni, we talk about Pat on here. We should call the godfather of organizational health. I don't know if anyone else is calling him that, but what do you think about that? Can we do that?
I've seen the movie The Godfather, but it has some negative implications in my brain.
All right, we'll call him the father of organizational health.
that true?
Well, I don't know. They call themselves the organizational health people, so we'll say that. Okay, the OH people. They had a cool unconference where they brought businesses truly from all over the world together and shared their principles. And he put up this Venn diagram, 2 circles, and they just talked about businesses often calibrating one way or the other too much on performance or dignity. And the key being to have a healthy organization. And for us, leading integrated businesses, we want to have health be essential, right? Foundational to what we're doing. They put up that Venn diagram about building cultures that have a balancing act of those 2 things, right? Performance and dignity both mattering. So from my perspective at the start, why do both matter? Why do both matter in a business? Well, the first half, performance. The reason it matters, well, we are a business. It's kind of plain and simple, right? We are a business. It's not a nonprofit. It is not just a ministry. Like, we are talking about businesses. And so performance.
Ooh, but sorry, I would say even if we were a ministry, performance still matters.
Ooh,
So,
good. Wow.
okay,
I can't speak on that, but nugget there. I like it. That's good.
I mean, performance just matters. So.
Performance matters, period.
Yeah, the metrics are different.
Sure.
Touche.
But I agree with Aaron.
Performance matters. There's a local organization. How would you describe Cultivate? How would you just, like, in a quick synopsis?
Yeah, what they call themselves is a venture accelerator.
Very cool. So there's a local venture accelerator that we've gotten to know, and they had a quote that I heard from them that says, "Without margin, there is no ministry." And so, like, even thinking from a business of why performance, like the why behind it mattering, without margin, there is no ministry for your business. One of my favorite quotes ever is the Margaret Thatcher quote about the Good Samaritan. And she once said that nobody would remember the Good Samaritan if they didn't have coin. And her whole point was they were able to live out their ministry because they had the resources to help the person, pay the bill, and say, if the bill goes up more, I'll come back and pay the rest of the bill for the Samaritan, or for the person who was left wounded and beat up on the side of the road. So I just think those are examples of performance mattering, and some whys. Now shifting to the other half, right, in this balancing act, dignity. Talking about dignity. I looked up the definition because I was like, okay, so, like, let's just, like, standard definition. Let's go Oxford. I guess you could maybe have a debate on Webster's and Oxford, but today was Oxford. State of being worthy of honor or respect. State of being worthy of honor and respect. And like, let's be real, businesses, while it might be its own entity, businesses that are made up of people. And we believe deeply in the Bible and Genesis 1:27, talking about man is made in God's image, right? The Imago Dei. And so if this is true, we want to give honor and respect and dignity to the humans that we serve, that make up our businesses, all of these elements, because, well, if they're made in the image of God, that's actually an element of worship. It's an element of community, all these pieces together. So I'll close and begin to pass to Michael and Aaron. Recently, one of our teammates, John Mark Lawrence, previous guest, right? Wonderful episode.
Yeah, that's been a minute.
It has been a minute. I was going to say, you'd have to search that one. That's right, but great. But he actually spoke at our network-wide all-staff recently on this subject. And he had this wonderful phrase that just like pierced me. And it was so good, talking about with performance and dignity, always balancing, never balanced. Always balancing, never balanced. And he had this tightrope metaphor that he gave us, talking about if you're on a tightrope, you never actually get to a place of like rest to stay on the thing that you want in the middle. You're always tensioning, you're calibrating back and forth, toggling one way or the other to keep yourself in the center. You're always having to balance, you're always balancing and never actually arrive. And I just thought that was beautiful language to summarize the culture that we want to build. A culture that recognizes performance matters, and you got to hold that tension. And then the people that we lead and work with matter, and you have to balance that. And it's always this dynamic intention process culturally that you have to be working for,
It's very active.
Very active. Yeah. There is no passivity to it, because then it will fall one way or the other. Yeah. You fall. That's right. So, all right. First question, stir it up. Aaron. Yeah. What are some symptoms of a business that has toggled or calibrated too far to the dignity side, so the performance is out of balance and not as strong as it should be?
I thought of a phrase that I used to hear from a former employer a lot, and I don't know if they coined this phrase or not, but the phrase made a lot of sense. Sanctioned incompetence, I think, would be the biggest red flag for me, that a business has over-calibrated to the dignity side. And to kind of roughly define sanctioned incompetence, it's essentially the concept that you are knowingly allowing people to perform under the standards. So a really surface, easy example would be, and I hope I'm not stealing from something, because I feel like this is said in something we're recording recently, but it's just on my mind of someone shows up late to a meeting and you as the leader don't address it. But everybody notices, the whole team notices Michael was late to the meeting. But we let it go because, grace, things happen, whatever, it's fine. Next week, Michael shows up late for the meeting again.
It would never happen.
And then, again, the whole team, we all notice, and we're kind of looking at you. And, I mean, you could make the argument of, you want culture to go, beyond just the leader, but we are noticing you as the leader or us as an entire group. Nobody's saying anything to Michael. Week 3, week 4, this continues to happen. And so at some point it becomes, we've shifted from we have grace for Michael because life happens, things happen, to now we have sanctioned his incompetence. We have essentially, in a very passive way, because we have not addressed it, we have said, without saying it, Michael, it is okay for you to be late whenever you want. And we're not ever going to say anything to you, hold you accountable, and I think as a leader, that can really diminish and deteriorate the respect that the rest of your team has for you. Because, again, yes, you want the culture to go deep to where maybe somebody else on the team is saying, hey, Michael, what's the deal? Why are you late all the time? But ultimately, we're looking to you as the leader in this example of dude, why aren't you saying anything? Why is it okay for Michael to continue to show up late to this meeting every single week with no accountability, with with no conversation. And it doesn't necessarily mean the conversation has to happen in front of everyone, but at some point, people need to know that the conversation has happened, whether that is they're made aware or they just see that a change has been made, that Michael starts showing up on time. Sorry, I threw you under the bus for this example.
It's okay.
But sanctioned incompetence is the main thing I think is a red flag for that, where either collectively as a group or as a leader, we are just essentially allowing poor performance as opposed to having a hard conversation. And at some point, it shifts from, okay, we're having grace to someone to, okay, well, now we're sanctioning their incompetence. We're just fine with it.
Yeah.
And then it makes it harder to have that conversation, honestly, the longer you let it go.
Gets more awkward. We don't need to have like another example, but that what you just described was a very like behavioral thing that being late or tardy kind of blanket applies to everyone. I just would encourage people to recognize what you're talking about is equally true for their like role performance. And I think it might be easier to deceive ourselves in someone's role that they just need more time to learn it if they're a new team member or something like that. Being late is being late. Like it's pretty black and white. With someone's role and like they need to be able to perform at this level doing this thing, I think it'd be easier to tell myself, well, they'll get there in 6 weeks, you know? So that was just my thought listening to you describe.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I there's a lot of nuances because maybe it's a new role and you're not exactly sure how long it will take someone to get there. But I think, and I think that's a real example that we've recently seen play out where we are trying to navigate like, okay, but that's where, and this will be in a later episode more, but like that's where accountability comes in to be able to sit down with other people and say, okay, I don't really know how long this should take. I think it should take about this long for this person to be able to do this. It's taking way longer. Am I off? What's the deal here? But I think having those conversations keeps us from slipping into sanction and competence. You're right, where it's like you're a year in and you're still not, this person still is not accomplishing what they need to be able to accomplish in their role. So that is, and I made a note here that I think, just my perception, I think that this happens a lot more in the nonprofit ministry, or even like a lot of our listening audience, like maybe they're not a nonprofit or ministry, but they are a secular business, but one who's looking to integrate their faith. I think anytime we bring our faith into it, unfortunately, I think it's easier to slip into this because we love Jesus. We want to be nice to people.
We love people.
We love people. And we're supposed to be, I'm joking with this, but like, we're supposed to be nicer and everything because we love Jesus. And I think it's harder sometimes, or a lot of times, for people of faith or people who are proclaiming to integrate their faith into their business to hold that line of like, yes, there is grace, but there are also performance expectations. And so that's where I think it's easier actually for our listening audience to go this direction of sliding too far to the dignity because we have the faith lens. It's because then it's like, oh, am I going to get accused of like, I don't love Jesus, or I'm not doing this the biblical way. I'm using air quotes for our audio listeners. I think it's a lot more common in those spheres. If we're like, dude, we don't care anything about Jesus or people, I don't have a problem then. Holding people to the fire.
I have had business owners like articulate what you just talked about that it's why they won't.
Yeah.
Because it is honestly simpler and cleaner and easier. Like it's just more binary to be like, no, I'm just going to be a business because if I put this out there, I don't know how to live in that space of like, this time this is the right decision and this time is maybe we let them go, but the right thing with these people, like balancing that is not something they want to sign up for. Yeah. Because that sounds really messy and complex and challenging and always in tension. Always in tension. Yeah. Okay, let's flip the question now. To you, Michael, what are some symptoms of a business that has over-calibrated the other way on the performance side and the dignity piece is not as elevated as it needs to be?
Yeah. I'm going to use this company as an example because it's so big and unrelatable to the small businesses that we talk to. I think Amazon is a great example of what this culture looks like, specifically with their warehouse employees. They're in the news all the time. I mean, they burn the candle at both ends of the stick, and they treat people like replaceable cogs in their machine. And so they're fine burning someone out in 45 days and replacing them. And so their turnover is incredibly high because they're just running people in the warehouse into the ground and burning them out really quickly. So a really high degree of turnover because you are just using and abusing your employees, squeezing all the juice you can, tossing them aside, and then replacing them. I think that could be, and I think small businesses could certainly be susceptible to that in a different way. Because maybe it's a 2-person job, but they're trying to keep their P&L on the profit side. And so like, all right, Clay, we need you to work 80 hours. This is what we need you to sacrifice for our business. When really they need 2 people, meaning 2 salaries to perform that role. And then I think from like a culture perspective, I was just thinking like, if you walk around our office, cause I think that we do the dignity side well. And like on a typical day, you're going to see people kind of talking, laughing, having fun at different moments, not all day, every day, but like you're just going to have a generally enjoyable,
sometimes silly, not always,
sometimes silly. I think if your work environment, especially if you're in person, there's never people having fun. I think that's a great sign that maybe you're just so performance driven that people feel like they can't have 5 minutes of water cooler talk or, whatever that looks like, where they can just take a break and go on a 10-minute walk with one of their coworkers to talk about something and, whatever that might look like.
Can I insert there? I know you're talking about not seeing that, but I just remembered a cool thing that my husband, a job he used to have, it was just he and one other guy in their office. For the most of the time he was there, it was just the 2 of them. And his boss, Jeremy, was a super nice guy. You guys have actually met Jeremy.
Yeah.
He implemented something called Fika, which is I think it's from Sweden, if I remember correctly. But it's like a common practice in, again, I think Sweden, where during the workday, they set aside, it's almost like siesta in in Latin American cultures, where they set aside a certain time of day, like 30 minutes every day at this time, where it's like, no work talk. And so what Jeremy and Brandon would do is like, I can't remember, it was like Thursdays at 2:00 every week, no matter what, Thursdays at 2:00, they would walk across the street to the coffee shop. They would bring a game or like just whatever. And for 30 minutes, like they grab coffee, they're literally, the only rule is you can't talk about work for 30 minutes. And I really love that. But I think that was inverse of what you're saying. That was a good indicator that, okay, we are not going too far on, I mean, they had a lot of sales metrics to me and performance things, and they had hard conversations and things like that about, metrics that needed to be met. But they were also holding that tension of every week, Thursday at 2, and they had other times but they're making an intentional effort to not just see if it happens. They're going to make sure that at least once a week they're spending time relating to each other on a non-work level. Yeah.
So if you just listen to Erin say that and think, we don't have time to do that, you might be imbalanced on performance. Just think about it. And then the last thing I thought of is the culture in your organization. You only give critical feedback to people. You're not giving team members praise. It's just, hey, you need to do this better. You need to do this better. And there's no positive feedback of, hey, you did this really well. You're just constantly telling people how they can do better, would maybe be another indicator.
So thinking back as an employee, like or as a team leader, maybe when is the last time I gave feedback to someone on my team that was not critical?
Yeah. Do you think, okay, so in the setting that we're describing, on all of your examples, and you used Amazon as a real example.
I didn't plan that. It just came out.
Swinging for the fences.
I ordered something from Amazon this morning, just to be clear. Like, I want to be...
Well, so here's my question. Do a company that is calibrated too far to the performance side, which is what we're talking about, do you think that is if you talked to leadership at Amazon, would they say we don't care about our people? Would they say the dignity's out of balance? Even though the company you were just describing at the finish, like, do you think people choose to be over there? Or do you think this is you drift into it and you've got to watch for symptoms to trigger yourself? Yeah. Are you tracking what I'm...
Yeah, I mean, my gut reaction there is that profit can justify a lot of things. Yeah. Our hearts are so deceitful. Like, I think we're all prone to that. So do I think that their leadership team is sitting around having a strategic conversation about how to abuse people? No, I do not think that. I would suspect they are doing their best from their view to create
Yeah.
a good work environment.
Yeah.
And it's the whole story about like the emperor with no clothes on.
Yeah.
Like, I think you just get in a position where you're an insanely successful company from a financial perspective. And so it's like, well, what we're doing must be good. It must be right. And none of us are thinking Amazon's trying to integrate their faith in their business, right? So they have a different standard than than the standard we're setting.
Sure.
And so their win is different than what we're declaring a win.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Even in a business who is working to integrate their faith into their workplace, that's exactly what I thought is, I mean, profit makes that harder, just to be very honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you are continuing to be profitable or your profit is increasing, it's like, it makes it harder to make a change and to look objectively at, is our workplace too focused on performance? Because it's like, well, things seem to be going well. And especially and this might happen only for a short amount of time or might come in waves, but if your employees are not that it's their fault, but like if your employees are not voicing that feedback, if you are, or maybe they are and you're not hearing that,
Yep.
maybe you don't have the accountability again,
Yeah.
That's a cliffhanger for a future episode, but
Set up.
But if you have the illusion, or to use some other talk, like if you feel certain, if you have the certainty, if you will, that like things are going well, because I can look at my books and see they're going well, all of my roles are filled, like things are going well, it's hard to look objectively and say like, well, is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. So this is intriguing. Just the vein you guys are on, we're correlating over-calibrated to performance. The examples we're giving are on a business that is highly profitable or being highly successful. Is there a time you could be over-calibrated into performance and your business may not be thriving and or winning and or profitable?
Sure.
Okay.
And that's like, Amazon's a dangerous example because they're
Sure.
they're like a country. They're so big.
They are their own zip code.
So it's like they're a dangerous example because it's apples to a woolly mammoth. Like, I don't know.
That was good. I liked it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yes, and I think in a small business setting that might be more common, is where you have beaten your team down so much, you've worn them thin, and you're driving for performance so much that you ironically aren't performing at the level you want. And what you think is, well, we need to work harder, we need to perform harder, we need to push harder.
Yeah.
But you're just digging a hole. I think that's very possible.
Yeah. So the takeaway I'm taking there is that profit and profit margins aren't necessarily an indicator of this being in balance, or right? Like
I think it just makes it harder to see.
Okay.
I think the profit blinds us a little.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you are balancing what we're talking about, walking the tightrope successfully, you should be an incredibly profitable company. I think that's a desirable outcome. And my belief is that would be a sustainable outcome by balancing on the tightrope.
Sure.
I think if you get drifted on either direction, you're actually risking not being as profitable as a company.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or do you agree?
Well, no, I think it makes sense, but I think toggling on the performance side could lead to more profitability.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of one of these when they could actually go both ways, but then is that sustainable? That was a key word that I think you said there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an intriguing.
Yeah. I like the language of burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's going to end at some point.
Yeah, the candle's going to burn out at some point.
Yeah.
And that might be you as the leader burning out at some point.
Touche.
Not just burning out your team.
Touche.
Your team will burn out before you do, probably.
Yeah.
You might join them.
Yeah. Good exploration. Well done. Thank you to both of you. Any final thoughts on the subject before we close the episode and set up for the next ones?
I would just like to quickly reemphasize what you talked about at the beginning, that analogy that John Mark gave of the tightrope walker, and that there's never a point where it's like, we are 50% performance and 50% dignity, and we are crushing it.
So let's take a nap and head on out. We're done.
It's something we constantly have to be mindful of and aware of. And I think the key to not going too far either way is constantly analyzing that and reassessing and asking ourselves the question of like, because I think even when you are intentionally looking to do this, there will be seasons that you are, if you were to knock out the percentages, it'd be like, okay, we're actually probably 60% on the performance end and 40% on the dignity end right now, if we're being honest. Okay, how do we again, always balancing, how do we move that a little bit more this way? Or how do we kind of find closer to center? But it's a constant conversation, and it has to be a constant intentional look at how things are going. And a lot of factors can make it sway either way. Things in your industry, you know, I mean, when the world shut down, like things outside of your control, like a global pandemic, that can toss things back and forth. You know, the volatility in your individual, like I said, in your individual industry, maybe employee turnover, maybe what your current employees are going through in their personal lives and how that integrates into their work life. I mean, there's so many factors that you've kind of constantly got to be aware.
Yeah, that's good. Michael?
I don't have anything to add. That's all I have to say about that.
That's all I had to say about that. You definitely got the plant more than me this episode, just to clarify. I would say it's a journey. That just I think goes with the always balancing piece, is that like you don't arrive, and we talk about that theme a lot in our own life, in our own maturation, in our own faith, and then if you are leading an integrated business, like there's never is an arriving, and so it is a journey. You got to keep working at it, keep balancing, keep asking for feedback from those closest to you, looking for symptoms on each side of it. We're going to talk about some more very specific ways to be able to keep these things in balance over the next, this series, right? We got 3 more episodes in this series. The next one's going to be on Crucial Combos. So that's exciting. We'll talk about Crucial Combos.
We'll have a live Crucial Conversation on this podcast.
Man, I already got called out by Michael like really
Come
recently. I don't know. I don't know if I want again. Okay. All right. I need that. That's right. So good. Then accountability. Are we going to do that also? Like live recording, like call each other out behaviorally.
I will bring feedback to that episode.
Accountability. And then everybody's favorite. Well, actually a lot of people's favorite, just not for an ENFP 7, systems. How we bring systems to be able to support a balancing of performance and dignity. So those are the next 3 internal episodes in this series. Really look forward to you coming back, joining the conversation with us. Okay. Verse for this episode. This episode actually comes from Hebrews 13:14. For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come. Like it is a journey. Remember that. Grace for your pace. Give yourself the eyes to know that this isn't where we belong, and we are playing a long game far past even Earth. And so until next week, choose life. Thanks for tuning into our show. If you want to learn more about how you can integrate your faith into your business, download our integrated business guide for free by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.